Hi, welcome to this Heritage Week video for the Omen 3D project in County Kilkenny. My name is Gary Dempsey from Digital Heritage Age, and as part of the Omen 3D project, we've been creating photogrammetry models of the Omen stones in County Kilkenny. As part of the project, we wanted to do a series of workshops, and these videos are going to feed into those workshops and give you an introduction to what is photogrammetry. So the process of photogrammetry is as simple as taking a series of overlapping photographs, using software then to stitch those photos back together and develop 3D models. Now these 3D models allow us then to take away the colour, which can be kind of natural biogrowth like lichens or moss on the stones, and then reveal the carvings that are underneath those. It's also very useful for reading old gravestones, for seeing high crosses, or for seeing any kind of carved detail on stone or heritage artifacts without damaging the stone and without using chemicals to remove the biogrowth from those stones. It allows us to accurately measure the details as well. So photogrammetry simply means taking measurements or geometry from photographs. So we can do this using digital cameras, we can use it using our smartphones, and we can do it from video stills as well. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to show you from one of the sites that we visited a small little video that we've taken. It's not the best kind of quality in terms that it's a little bit jittery. It was taken on a phone, but you'll be able to see some of the process that we're able to take a video image, chop that up into a still image, and then using those still images to create a nice 3D model. Usually for photogrammetry what we would do is we would take a series of photographs, but more recently the software has become quite good that we can just take a small piece of a video, and using that video then we can chop that into little bits of frames, and each frame then is an individual photograph. So provided that you hold your camera very, very steady, you should be able to record something and pull out some of the detail. So what I'm going to do, I'm just using a smartphone here. I'm going to record a video and I'm going to move it back and forth over the Omen stone. So I'm just walking along the edge here. Now I'm making sure that the whole stone is visible in the camera, and I'll show you back the video that I've taken. You want to make sure that there's plenty of overlap and that you're moving quite slowly. And then to get more detail, so something like an Omen stone is going to have a lot of detail on the edges, you can move the camera a lot closer and then run it back down along the edge. Now we're very lucky that these Omen stones, the inscriptions are quite visible in places, but there are probably areas on it that we can't quite see the inscriptions. So hopefully they'll come out. And again, I'm keeping the kind of whole area of the stone and a bit of the surrounding ground, and that's all just for context, so the video knows what's part of the stone and what's part of the ground, and the software will know that later on. You want to go to a website called dvdvideosoft.com. Now this will allow us to get some free software that will take a video and chop that up into a series of still images. So when you go to this website, you'll see a button up in the top right hand corner for apps. If you click on that and then you just scroll down, you'll then see converting software, and underneath the converting software, free video to JPEG converter. So once you can click on here to see how to use that, and you can download that file. And once that's downloaded, you can install this on your computer. Like I say, it's a free piece of software. It's quite useful and quite powerful for converting video clips every couple of frames, every couple of seconds, or rendering out a total number of frames over a length of a video. So I have this software pre-installed on my computer. When we open it up, it's quite a simple interface. It just says add files. So we click on that, and then we navigate to where we have our video files. So in this case, they'll be for the Omen 3D project. Okay, so when you open up this software, it's a pretty simple interface that you're going to meet. It will just say add files, and then we navigate to where the file that we want to load is. In this case, it's this video that was taken on my phone, and we can open that. We can break this up every couple of seconds. So by choosing every 1 second, it will break the frame every 1 second. We can do this over frames as well. So we can say break this up over a number of frames. Now most videos will be something like 25 to 30 frames per second. So you can break it up again, you can calculate out the seconds over that. So we'll try first of all to break this up over 5 seconds. We want to set the save out folder, so down here. Just to make this easy and that I'll be able to find it again, I'm going to put this onto my desktop and just make a new folder and call it Home3D. And open that. So now you can see here's the file path that we'll be using. And then I'm just going to press convert. And then a small little window pops up and it starts converting the images for us. We'll make a little sound once it's ready. And then we can pop out to the desktop and we can open up this folder. Okay, so we're going to need a lot more images than that. So what we're going to do is, instead of every second, we're going to do this every 10 frames. I'll just delete these previous ones and convert. And you're going to want anything between 70 to 100 photographs for a video clip like this. Usually with photogrammetry, we might work on anything between 100 to 200 photographs for really high detail, but you should be able to get enough detail from a large carving from about 60 to 100 photographs. Once this is processed, again, we just press close and we just have a quick look. So we have 192 images within this. So now I'll be able to open up the software that we use for photogrammetry. In this case, we use a piece of software called Agisoft. So I will just show you what this looks like. So you can just go to agisoft.com. So it's agisoft.com, that's agisoft.com. When you want to get the software, you can go to downloads. And it can be an expensive piece of software. The costs there, if we want to look at buy here for a second. So we can buy a basic license for about €153, which is $179, or you can buy a professional license for about $3,500. But we do get the option of having a free trial version. So you can send them your email and they'll give you a license for a free trial, or you can download the software anyway, you just won't be able to save out of that. So for practicing, this is a very good method of doing it. So we want to use the standard edition and a 64-bit for that. If you're getting the free trial, you can go for the professional edition because they'll give you the license for the professional edition for 30 days. Okay, so with Agisoft then, it's a simple enough method for processing images. So if you look across the top here, we have a series of kind of tabs on the title bar, and what we want to look for is workflow. So this will allow us then to follow along a set workflow here by adding different images or adding different steps. So the first step that we're able to do is add photos. So you can add a whole photo or folder of photos. Again, we're just going to go back out to our desktop. We're going to find Omen3D. And then all you have to do is navigate to the folder where the images are and then say select folder. You want to import those as a single camera. And that will give you 193 cameras. So if you click on the little dot next to chunk here, that will show 193. 193 means we haven't aligned anything yet. So the first step when we're doing this, then we go back up to workflow and we say align photographs. Now just for the speed of processing here, and you mightn't have powerful kind of graphics cards on your computer, so we'll do this at medium. All the other settings are the same, we're just changing the kind of processing power that we need. So if your computer can't handle this, you can always drop this down a little bit lower. So we'll go for medium for this, and it should run quite quickly. So there's a number of different steps. It will first detect all the different pixels in all of the images, and then it will start to align those pixels together. So this is where the overlapping of the photographs becomes very important. So the photo should have anything between 60 and 80% overlap. So the processing can take a little bit of time. Usually this initial step can be done in about half an hour, 40 minutes. With the medium settings here, we should get something an awful lot quicker. It's when we get into the reconstruction of the actual 3D model, the next couple of steps, that the time gets added on and we end up having longer processing time. After the first step, you should get an idea if your images are going to align. And the alignment of the images will be the kind of success of your 3D models. So we've put 192 images into this. What we're hoping for here is that 192 would be aligned, and that would be a perfect kind of reconstruction. If they don't perfectly align, as long as about 80% of that aligns, we should be okay. So you're looking for anything kind of above 120, 130 here. So in this case, we have 192 of 192 aligned, which is quite good. And we can actually see the ohm stone here. So we can actually start to rotate this. When you're working in 3D space, there are three directions we can move: the X, the Y, and the Z. And this is the position of each of the individual points on the object. So you can see down here, there's a little colored bar. It's got a green, a red, and a blue. And then when you hover over near the object, you will get this little lines lighting up, and the green will rotate left and right, the red will rotate kind of back and forwards, and the blue line will rotate then on the horizontal. And depending on kind of how you've turned that will depend on the kind of direction that your object is facing in. We can also navigate up here by pressing this little button which resets the view. The reset view is the angle of the camera when you were taking it. So the software is smart enough to be able to know the angle that your camera was at compared to the subject that you're trying to record. One thing that I like to do is to kind of tidy things up at this stage, so we can start to get rid of a little bit of the extra detail. So what I'll do is I'll come up here to move object. I'll click on the little arrow next to that and I'll say rotate object. Then I'll press 5 on my keyboard, which will change my view from perspective, which is kind of a wide angle camera view, to orthographic, which is say a top down view or a front on view. Now, because I'm rotating the object, it won't move what we'll call the world axis, so it won't move these little XYZ coordinates in the bottom corner. It will just move the object, and what we're trying to do is align the object with the world then, so we want to be looking straight down onto the object. The next thing that we want to do is this little box around the object. We want to straighten that up a little bit as well. So we go to this second icon over here. It's like a grayed out box with a hand over it, and we want to rotate the region. And again, this won't move the object, but it will move this little box around it. And you want to just rotate that until it's kind of starting to line up with the shape of the object here. So depending on the object, this can be quite easy or it can be a little bit more difficult. If you're working with an ohm stone or a headstone, which is kind of either freestanding or lying on the ground, it's relatively easy to do. If you're working with a carving, say above a doorway, a keystone, or you're working with a cornerstone on a building that might have some detailed carvings on it, the camera is a little bit more awkward to kind of maneuver around. But you don't have to do this step, it's just something that will help you later on, and that's a process that I like to kind of get out of the way at this stage. So again, on this little grayed out box, we can now resize the region. So there's a little arrow next to that, and I'm just clicking that to bring up the sub-menus under it. Now you're going to see these little corners will light up, they'll get a little bit of detailing on them, and then we're able to bring that back in until it's in line with the stone. Now, what you don't want to do is bring that in over the stone in any way, because then this won't get processed. This will all disappear and you'll have a nice section through the stone. But we don't want to do that because the processing stages do take a long time after this. I'm just going to rotate it on the vertical now. And all I'm really doing here is I'm rotating around to make sure that the stone is completely within this box from every angle that I can view it at. So I'm not clipping this in any way. And then I can reset the view so I'm looking back down on top of the object here. One thing to note is that if you've used a long lens camera, a zoom camera, to record something quite high up on a building, that the object will be far away from the origin point. So the origin point in 3D is at 0. And like I say, the software is kind of smart enough to know where things are in the world compared to your camera lens. So if you're using a digital camera for this, so if you're using something like this, then you want to make sure that you're probably zoomed out to around 50 on your camera. So you can, for a small lens like this, an 18 to 55 millimeter, you can generally shoot anything between 18 and 55 and it will scale the object up and down. The ideal for real world scale would be about 50 millimeters, and then some people say the ideal for recording photogrammetry is somewhere around 24. So there's lots of kind of different advice that you'll get from this, but generally I find this lens is quite useful. When I swap over to something like this, which is a 300 millimeter lens, so it goes from 70 up to 300. So we've got a very kind of long extendable zoom lens on this, that as we move up in size, the object is going to get smaller, and that's because we're recording more detail in a more confined space as well. So when you're using zoom lenses, your object will be smaller in 3D space, whereas if you're using kind of standard lenses, your object will kind of scale within a relative area to that. Okay, so the next stage, once we have this box kind of closed in around the object, is we'll go back to workflow. And we'll go to build dense point cloud. Now again here I'm going to just choose a lower setting on this. I would generally recommend something like high, just to kind of really get the detail out of the object. But I'm going to suggest low because most people will be able to run that on their computer. You can leave the kind of advanced settings the way they are. We want to use depth filtering aggressive, so we want to do this as kind of hard or as harsh as possible. And then I'm going to press OK on this. Again, depending on the amount of photographs you have, depending on the detail of the object, this might take longer or shorter. And again, depending on the power of your computer, it will depend on how kind of detailed or the length of time that this is going to take. So again, there's a number of different processes that it will go through first. So the first thing it will do is to determine the depth of each of the images. And this is kind of creating what we call a normal map. So it reads how close to how far each of the details are to the camera. And then once that depth map is created, then we're able to build out a dense point cloud. So that's what we saw in the last stage, was an aligned tie point cloud. So just kind of rough outline of the object. And the dense point cloud then takes all of those points and begins to multiply them out to create a really detailed 3D model. Even in something that we're running on low on this computer, we should be able to see a lot of detail on this. Like I say, I generally go for high, but I'm looking for measurements and looking for really fine detail. But going for low, you'll still get that structure and you'll still get the detail of the object. Okay, so now that that's finished, up here across the top of the software, you'll see there's a number of dots have started to kind of light up. So next to our reset view, there are 4 large dots, and that's our tie point. That should be what's visible at the moment. And next to that, there's this kind of little box of 3x3 dots there. So if we click on that, we can start to see the detail of the 3D model. So this is actually quite good. You can see it's nice and evenly spaced out. If you did this on high, you wouldn't even be able to see through this. So if we go down to click on the little button next to this, so the dense point cloud is this kind of colored thing. If we go down here to classes, we zoom out a little bit, you can see this is all white, and this is showing the detail. Now we've got a couple of little floating points over here. You can see them off here. So we're going to need to clean those up, otherwise that will affect our model, and you can see them over here. And this is very kind of normal stuff that you'll get when you're doing photogrammetry. So the depth of the kind of edge of that stone, this is why we recorded that additional detail around it, so we can kind of pull these points away, either by the color, or we can use editing tools to do this. So the first kind of editing tool that I'll generally use is the dense point cloud confidence. So when we look at this, you can see the series of green and red colors all around the stone here. Now, again, if you did this on high, you'd have a lot more of this, so you'd have a lot more error. So it's not overly confident about these points. But we can very, very easily get rid of this by going to Tools up here, coming down to Dense Cloud, and then coming over here to Filter by Confidence. So what I found the best to do for this is I want to get rid of all of this green. I want to get rid of all of this red. So the red is mostly what we want to get rid of. So that's anything above, we'll say 3. And then I want to go a little bit into the green, so I'm going to get up as far as 5. So I'm going to change our confidence range from 0 to 5 and press OK. So now you can see it's isolated all of these red and green points. We can come up here to our editing tools. So next to the little navigation tool is a square box, and that's our rectangle selection tool. We can select everything on the screen and then come back up here and press the delete selection. If you delete something that you don't want to, you can just press Ctrl Z and it will come back. So and you can do that right back to kind of the beginning of the edits that you've begun making. Then we come back into Tools again. We want to show our model. So we go back to Dense Point Cloud, come down to Filter by Confidence, and then leave the minimum at 0 and put the maximum back up to 255. And there we have our model. Now we're still getting a couple of little green dots over there, and we're still getting a couple over there. So we could do the same process again, but what I actually want to show you this time is if we change this rectangular selection down to this free form, and then anywhere you draw on screen, you'll get this kind of red selection showing up. So what we want to do is draw just beneath the green dots here. Don't have to be too steady, as long as you don't take a big chunk out of your 3D model, that should be okay. If you want to continue on, so if you're going to let go of the mouse button and you continue on, it will suddenly deselect some of the objects, but if you hold Shift on the keyboard, it will allow you, Control on the keyboard, it will allow you to add additional points in there. And then to move, I'm holding the middle mouse button, and then I can move this left and right. So it takes a little bit of used to getting controls for 3D environments, kind of used to using those or used to controlling those. But once you do, you'll kind of be flying around them, and you'll be moving back and forth between the different tools. Okay, so there are the additional points that I want to get rid of. I can just press delete then. Again, the little X button up here in the top corner. It's just grayed out now because I don't have anything selected. If I really wanted, I could come back in here and start cleaning up more pieces down here. So there's a couple of more green floating points just there. And you can see as we get very close that they're just off the main parts of the object. So that's what we call noise. I could also come along the edge of the stone there and start to clean up the ground. So using this tool, come along the very bottom edge of the stone. You want to make sure there's no detail there that you want. Again, I'm holding Control. And this is a handy little tool. It's called the Freeform Selection Tool. So you can kind of draw it anywhere you want and then go back on it. And it will select everything kind of within that area. Now, here's a good example of where I've selected something I don't want to select on the stone. So this would create a little hole inside the stone. I'm going to hold Shift, go back to my selection tool and just hold Shift and then draw around that, and it will get rid of that selection. So Control adds a selection and Shift takes a selection away. Now, like I say, again, this will take just a little bit of use to kind of getting your head around. And if you wanted to just jump to the next step without doing any of this, you'd get to see what your 3D model would look like. There'd be some little errors and some little what we call bubbles in the 3D, but this is what you ultimately want to be doing, tidying up your 3D model. Okay, so I can just press delete on that. Oops, I pressed crop. So again, just to show you the Control Z. So this is crop. That will keep what you have selected and delete everything else. I want to press delete up here. So now I've got what I've selected there. These points should be okay. If they are off the object, you can kind of come in. You want to zoom right in, and again, just the middle mouse wheel to zoom in and out. And then delete. Okay, so the next step then is back up to workflow. And we're going to build mesh. When we're building mesh, we could probably go for high. It shouldn't take too long. Again, if it does drop that down, you'll start to lose detail in that. So we want to use reuse depth maps. Nope, no option there to reuse them, so that's okay. And then press OK on this. Okay, so that was pretty quick. Click on this little button over here, and this will show us the 3D model. So this is the detail of it here. Now, because we've done this from a video and because we've kind of gone low, we're just getting this blobby mess. You can see here where it's filled in underneath the bottom. And again, what we could do is come around here to the side and resize this region and bring that right up. Go back to our point cloud there. Bring that right up. Rotate our region around so it's in line with the stone. And then resize that so the box kind of will cut off any bubbling that we're going to get. And again, this is just because we haven't got a really high detailed mesh. So again, build mesh, then it's point cloud, we'll go for high, and all of the other details are okay there. And again, click over here on the mesh, and this will show us what the mesh looks like. So now you can see this has been cut off at the bottom. We can change then between shaded, and we can go back then to wireframe. And this will show us again the details. So normally you would see a lot of detail in here already when you're working with high, but again, we're just working with the basic stuff here. So I want to create a texture. So I'm going to go to workflow and build texture, and then I want to change the texture type to diffuse map. And you can make this whatever size you want as long as it's a multiple of 512. So I'm going for 8 times resolution, or 8K, so 8192. If you want to go for a 4K resolution, it would be 4096, and it's either multiplying or dividing that number then as you go up. So we press OK, and again, this should take a couple of minutes just to run through and create a detailed kind of texture for our object, and this is where we add the color back onto the object. So this process, again, depending on the speed of your computer, can take a little bit of time, and you could drop that number down. So you don't really want to go lower than 2556, so 256 resolution or 2K resolution. 4096, which would be 4096 in your resolution, is kind of a standard that people will go to. I'll generally go for the highest I can get, which is 8192. But yeah, just to kind of speed it up, you can drop that number down as you're going along. Okay, so now we can click back on our model, and we can come down to model texture. This might take a couple of seconds to load because we're loading in a high detail texture. And there we can see the stone. Now, everything down here where we're seeing grass is off the actual stone. And again, if we were doing this with much more high detailed photogrammetry, then we would have been able to kind of go in and edit that a little bit more. Now, you could still come in and use your freeform selection tool to kind of select pieces of this that you don't want. So we only want the stone there. And you could begin to tidy it up at this point. Again, holding Shift for pieces that you want to, or sorry, Control for pieces that you want to add, Shift for pieces that you want to remove. So that's the selection that you're adding or removing from. That's okay, we're not cutting too much off the stone there, so like all the carving on this stone is on the top. So you can just press delete for that. And then just take this little section here away and delete that there as well. And then the last step we're going to do is we're going to try and build an occlusion map. So we're going to go back to build texture, and then we're going to build an occlusion map. You can press OK, and again, this should take a couple of seconds. An occlusion map is a black and white map which should show us the detail of the way light bounces off the object. So this is kind of where we really start to see the detail of the ohm. Now, again, for this one, we might not get an awful lot of detail because it's based off the 3D model. So if we change our model down to occlusion map, no. So we're getting some of the more deep kind of filled kind of geometry of the stone here, where these pieces are lower than the surrounding areas. But we're not seeing too much of the ohm in there at the moment. So what I'll do is I will show you a project where we have completed this and kind of show you the detail that we've pulled out along the edge of the ohm here. For now, we'll go back to our diffuse texture. What you want to do is go to File and Export Model. And then we can export this out as a 3D model. Generally, I will use the wavefront OBJ. That's a pretty good format to use. But you can choose from any of these different formats here to build out your 3D model. For kind of people who are into 3D printing, you can use something like an STL or a PLY model. So the standard PLY or the STL models you can 3D print. But any of these will be open, should be able to open in any other 3D software. And like I said, you can kind of really get the nice detail out of that. So give it an understandable name. So just call it Ohm3D here for the moment. And then I'm going to bring this back to a new folder and press save. You want to export out JPEG, and then you can include a comment. So we're working on Kilkenny Ohm. And this will just be embedded into the kind of data of the file. So it could be like your name, or it could be the name of the project that you're working on. As an example of using a digital camera as opposed to recording video on your phone and extracting images, you can see here the process that we're using to record the stone. So generally we're walking around the stone in a circular motion, trying to get as much overlap of the images as possible. So if I flick through the images here, you'll just see them moving in the next image. So each one should have about 60 to 80% overlap, and you can see there's probably more than that in this image, but the idea is that the camera is constantly moving and that we can still see key features and functions of the stone as we're moving through that. So moving in a set kind of fluid motion around the object. And then for more detail, we're kind of getting closer to the stone and then moving along the edge back and forth. And you can start to see even some of these images, the ohm is quite visible on these stones. So it should come out quite nicely. And I'll show you the process for this now. So these are the kind of detailed overlapped images, if you like. And then this is the ohm stone process. So this is the tie point. This is the initial kind of phase of recording. So, and you can see there I've reduced the bounding box quite down. But this looks something a lot more similar to what we had when we had a dense point cloud. So if I move over to the dense point cloud here, you can see I've cleaned this up quite a lot using the tools here just to extract anything that I don't want. And you can't see the points at this stage, and you can actually see the ohm in there. But if we were to zoom right in, you can see those individual points on the stone. Now, again, if I go down to point cloud confidence, I've cleaned up all the red points off this, and we can still see this kind of fine little detail. So there's this little line running down the stone here, which you couldn't see in the video version, but we can really see the ohm. It's quite deeply incised into this stone. When we move along then to the mesh model, we should be able to see an awful lot more detail. And again, just this takes a couple of seconds to load when we're using the model texture. Again, an awful lot more detailed. And if we go down to the occlusion, we can really see the detail here. So this will pop now in a second. Oops, sorry, let's go to model texture. And there we go. So this is what we're looking for when we do the occlusion culling. We can already see that the depth of those ohm inscribed pieces are along the stone there. That would have been the kind of shading that we were getting from the video model just along here, where again this part of the stone is a little bit further away from the camera. So the fine detail that we're able to pull out from this are as kind of detailed or as small as ohm inscriptions, which is why this process of photogrammetry is extremely useful for recording ohm stones. I'll have uploaded the kind of another video series to go along with this, one that kind of shows me recording a gravestone in County Galway, and then one which will kind of show me recording this ohm stone and give you a little bit more detail of that. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me at digitalheritageage.com, and you'll be able to find more about the workshops that we'll be delivering as part of this project in the future, and other workshops that we're delivering around the country as well. If you want to find out more about the Omen 3D project, you can visit the Omen 3D website, or you can visit sketchfab.com and search for Omen 3D or Omen 3D, and you'll see all the 3D models that have been recorded there over the years.